Hello and welcome to an ATA live stream special edition here. I am one of your hosts, ATA Chief Economist John Humphreys, and I am joined with ATA President, who's just accidentally muted himself because he didn't realize I'd unmuted him, Brian Marlow. Brian, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me know I just boomed it and muted myself because I didn't realize, but that's okay. That's okay. We're good with tax policy and misinformation bills, trying to get rid of those, but apparently no good with microphone management. So apologies.
Glorious. A few years ago, I thought Christmas started on the 24th of December, but now with 3 young kids, well into Christmas season. So Merry Christmas. You'll be there soon, Brian. You'll be there soon.
Yep. We've already got the tree up. We just now need to, put all the stuff on it. So it's, it as soon as it hit December, it's like, it's basically Christmas.
Beauty. All right, so this is an ATA live stream. What's ATA? Australian Taxpayers Alliance. That's us, taxpayers.org.au. We do most of this stuff out of love, but it sometimes costs money. So if you want to give us money, feel free to go to the website. That'll be the last plug. So this is a live stream where there are a couple of political guests to talk about a couple of hot political issues. Primarily, as you'd know if you're tuning in already, the online age verification bullshit that's gone on recently. But then we're going to spin off from that into a bunch of other stuff, the state of centre-right politics in Australia, the upcoming federal election, and much more. This is live streaming to 3 places, to ATA on YouTube, ATA on Facebook, and last minute change, it's going to my personal Twitter, not because I'm trying to hog the glory, but because it needed to have a premium account to be able to live stream it.
I see your sneaky little trick. I see what's going on.
So anyway, this is live stream to those 3 places. If you're on any of those now and you're watching, could I please encourage you to stop, pause, give it a like, give it a share, send it around to a few people, get more people in here watching this live. They will be able to watch a recording later, but it's more fun if it's live. Also because you will be able to make comments, and as you're making comments, we will be able to see them coming in, and we will be able to chuck them up. See, I just saw Tim's name. I hope the quote's smart. I'm old enough to watch this, but I doubt I'm mature enough. Oh, there you go. I see, Tim, I just trusted you so much. Put up the quote first, read it second. But so please share it around. Get the everyone else in the door. So we've got a nice big group and we'll be able to interact with you. We'll rant a bit because everyone in this room, the 5 of us all like to talk, but then we'll try to interact and get to questions if they're there. So please like and share. Now it's live as well. So just, all the caveats there. That means all the mistakes we actually make, you'll be here to see. We won't be able to edit them out while we're going live. But that's it for the introductions. So with that said, I think some of the guests can't stick around for too long, so I should bring them up on stage. So I'm just going to bring them all up. and then we'll run around for opening comments, and then we'll start being old men shouting at clouds. All right, so welcome to the table, Malcolm Roberts, George Christensen, and Jordan Dittloff. Gents, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Going well, yes. Thanks very much.
Good, mate, good.
All right, good to see us all. Now, I believe the person with the tightest timeline in front of us is Citizen George Christensen. So if that's our councillor, I should say, not just citizen anymore, he's back in the game. Mackay Council, I believe. But anyway, Councillor George Christensen. Actually, before I do that, I mean, I gave a little introduction for what this is all about, the age verification stuff. But if I may, if I interrupt and contradict myself straight away, just a 2-minute overview of this. Probably the best person to go to there would be the person who looks the most like a lawyer amongst us. So, Jordan, if I could throw you under the bus for the succinct, lawyerly introduction of what is it, notwithstanding the silly hat, that's got us riled up politically for the last week.
See, it used to be not that long ago that I would have thought that was a compliment, and now I realise it's not. But yeah, so look, we're here because on Thursday, as Malcolm knows, he was unfortunately there, and the government saw fit to ram a whole bunch of legislation, about 30-something bills, through the Senate on Thursday night. And one of those bills was a bill that was particularly bad, the social media and age restrictions bill. And what that bill basically purports to do is to limit access to social media for people not yet 16 years of age. Although, as Malcolm rightly pointed out on the night, it's very questionable the extent to which you can do that. But by necessary implication, the law also requires that everybody using social media, Albanese says it's not about verifying their age, it's about verifying whether they appear to be a certain age, but it's going to have the effect of requiring that social media platforms take reasonable steps to exercise that obligation. So, yeah, it's a pretty unfortunate situation we find ourselves in, and it's also deeply ironic that a few days before, the coalition was championing their free speech credentials and patting themselves on the back for, being late to the party to oppose a bill they originally proposed in the Morrison government, and then they can, with a straight face and a very impressive amount of mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance, turn around the next day and say, no, actually, this is fine, really.
Well, they completely undid sort of any kudos they could have built up with the misinfo bill. I don't mean to interject before we throw to George.
No, please.
But, when they decided to oppose the misinformation bill and started making all the right noises about that, you put your ear to the ground politically, and you could see a lot of disaffected Liberals thought that maybe the coalition had turned a page. But, yeah, as he said, almost just a few days later, they completely just flipped the script and then actively pushed to not only support the age verification bill, but rush the bill and push to potentially limit the trial periods and things like that. It's just insanity. Well,
having cut in before George now, I'll quickly throw to George. So Jordan's outlined what's happening. Is it a good or a bad thing, George? How's that for Dorothy Dixer?
Well, firstly, all due respect to Senator Malcolm Roberts, one of the great senators who stood up and opposed not only this but the MAD bill, and was there from the very beginning. We didn't have to wait, knowing what position that Malcolm Roberts would have on these anti-free speech, anti-privacy, anti-liberty bills. So thank you for all that you do, Malcolm. But this bill is atrocious. It's cloaked, as is most of these things that end up becoming tyrannical or authoritarian, in the garb of security and safety. And we're going to protect your kids. The old Simpsons line, from Mrs. Flanders. Won't anybody? No, it wasn't Mrs. Flanders. It was Reverend Lovejoy, Helen Lovejoy. Yes. But won't somebody think of the children? Well, of course, that gets all the heartstrings tugged, and the polls show something like 85% of Australians support such a measure. And look, I don't really want my daughter to be sucked into the social media funnel, but that's my job as a parent. It's not the job of the government to do parenting for me. And this doesn't just apply to kids. We all know that. This is about verifying the age of everyone online, and no matter what they say. And look, thankfully there were amendments moved at the last minute which tried to put some sprinkles on this crap sandwich. But at the end of the day, it's still a crap sandwich. And we could have the exposure of our personal data via hackers. We could have big tech using facial and biometric monitoring to determine who we are, and then we don't know what's going to be in the fine print there when we sign up. Perhaps that data is going to be kept, and we're going to agree to it being kept in order to use their service. How do we know what is going to truly happen here? And the other thing is that, again, the bill might not allow it at this point in time, but we always see legislative creep, and it always goes the wrong way. Could this end up de-anonymizing social media? And that's probably going to be the biggest concern, because there's a level of protection that some people have when they're on platforms like X and Facebook and Telegram and whatnot, where there might be people who are in the know who can actually spill the beans on government overreach. But of course, government overreach is going to try and stop that. And I think that that's part of the pathway that's actually happened here. And it is a shame that with the Liberal National Coalition, my former colleagues, that it was, 2 steps forward, getting rid of that misinformation bill, and then one big step backwards on this bill. But hats off to Senator Alex Antic and Senator Matt Canavan for actually crossing the floor on this. Because that's some, I've got to tell you, that's bravery. But they've shown that bravery on a very, very important subject for the Australian people.
It's actually a bit of a disappointment that it should be a brave thing to do, because the Liberal Party used to have a proud tradition of conscience votes and of being different to the Labor Party, where there wasn't this iron discipline required, or you'd lose your job or sacrifice your political career. So I think you're absolutely right, and I was immensely proud of both Alex and Matt Canavan. But at the same time, I was a little bit sad that I should be proud of them, or that it should be unusual. I don't know if you felt that way, Malcolm.
I felt very proud of Matt and Alex, and especially Matt, even more so because he came up with some fabulous amendments, really, really very effective amendments. But I think it's important to recognise that there are several points here. The first point is that this is not just a bill on its own. It's part of a suite of bills. The first, all introduced or developed, where those couple that were not introduced into the Parliament by the Liberal Nationals, they were developed under the Liberal Nationals. The first was the Misinformation and Disinformation Bill, basically a censorship bill. The second was the Digital Identity Bill, which we know what that is. The third was the Age Verification Bill, which really requires everyone to have a digital identity eventually. There's a fourth one in there. Oh, that's right. The Identity Verification Bill, and which allows biometric tracking. And then there's the fact that I asked the Reserve Bank if they were working on a digital currency, and they admitted they were. They hesitated a little bit, but they admitted they were. And then they also admitted, to their credit, that it would be tied into a global digital currency. So this is heading towards a social credit system. That's what people need to understand. That's first point. The second point, John and everyone, is that it's a joint initiative between the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. It's a uni-party bill. It's a uni-party suite. But it goes beyond that. If you look at these similar initiatives going on in the other Western democracies, it comes from the globalists. It's a global bill. It's a global suite, rather. So this the kind of thing is going on in Western democracies. And we can see that in Britain, it's already advanced. George is saying it will advance here. And I agree with him. It will.
It already is.
It's set up.
It's happening simultaneously.
Sorry?
Well, it already is, and it's happening simultaneously, right? Like this. I remember talking to coalition MPs saying, I'm concerned that this bill seems to just be some monster out of the deep state that's come out of nowhere, and was assured that that's not the case. But meanwhile, almost a carbon copy is being rolled out across the UK and looking like it'll be implemented in other European nations.
Well, Starmer's locking people up. Starmer arrested 150 people, journalists and commentators, and he locked some of them up and they're still in jail. And just because they disagree with the government's view. That's it. And, we first belled the cat 4 years ago when Morrison introduced it. We warned everyone, and that was the Misinformation, Disinformation and Digital Identity Bill. We warned people, and we've had protests against it. George spoke at the protests. And Brian and George were very, very effective with the Citizens Go campaign. So thank you so much. But one of the things that's important to recognise is that the people stopped the misinformation, disinformation bill. It wasn't me speaking up for 4 years. It wasn't you guys. It was the people. Because when they put the heat on, and that's really important to understand, a democracy is only viable when it's an active democracy and people are active. When they're just spectators, it turns into tyranny, which is what we've seen under both parties, under COVID, under normal, even without COVID.
Well, that raises the good question of the timing here, because the misinformation bill, there was enough time for people to be able to activate, and that, people action actually ended up seeming to make a difference. This time round, there seemed an ungodly amount of haste. I don't know if so I haven't worked in the Senate, so the people closer to Canberra might have an inside running on this, but it seemed like a ridiculously tight turnaround. 1 day for submissions, half a day for an inquiry, 1 day in the Senate total, but less than. So in case I've got that wrong or misunderstood it, can you guys with more inside knowledge of how that kind of works?
My understanding is that inquiry almost didn't even get up.
Correct.
It wasn't for people like Matt and Malcolm and others in the Senate pushing for it, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, let's
George, you guys have worked inside the belly of the beast. What does it mean that they was so ridiculous? What did they do, firstly, to explain it to us numpties on the outside who don't understand the process? And why did they do it like that?
Well, because they want to control the debate. But it's very important, if we just cut to the chase, the Labor Party on the Thursday morning introduced a bill to guillotine, I think 33 bills, something like that, over 30. And the Greens opposed the misinformation and the social media ban on under 16s, because they saw what we have been telling them. Give credit to the Greens; they woke up that it'll ultimately be a way of capturing everyone on a digital identity. The second thing that the Greens were opposed to the migration bill, 3 migration bills. Now we were opposed to the whole bloody lot being put on guillotine. But anyway, when the government didn't have the numbers, because the crossbenchers and the Liberal Nationals said, "Oh no, this is the end of democracy, respect for the people, and all the rest of it," the government went away and came back again with 28 bills, I think, minus the Greens migration bills and the social media ban bill, and that went through. And then Simon Birmingham, on behalf of the Liberals, proposed to include the social media ban. That was put back into the guillotine because Labor and Liberal combined have way above the numbers that are needed. So that you can thank Simon Birmingham, who a few hours later announced his retirement immediately from the Senate, for doing that. And you can look at the Liberals for voting for it. So it was clearly something that's been organised, designed, introduced and passed by both parties. Now, to look at your timing, it was introduced from the lower house on the Thursday morning into the Senate. It was then exempted from the bill's cut-off, so no scrutiny, automatically sent to a committee, usually, to have an inquiry. Then they sent it to an inquiry, starting with 24 hours notice for the closure of submissions. And to their credit, the people of Australia, 15,000 people responded and basically shut down the Parliament House collection. No, they did. They had to cut it off. And then they had an inquiry at the last minute that had three distinct sessions in it for lasting 3 hours. And that was it, John. And then they introduced the bill into the Senate and guillotined it. Sorry, they put it forward as guillotine. But they did give us, thanks to Matt, 1 hour to debate. And they almost took it up with the minister responding to Sarah Henderson's Liberal senators, Dorothy Dix's. And they were almost going to take that whole time up themselves until Matt stood up, and then we all got a chance to speak.
Malcolm, if I can for a moment comment on that, it is disgraceful. And so my introduction to politics when I was a young Liberal was working with Sarah Henderson on her 2010 and 2013 election campaigns. Yeah, tell me about it. By the end of that 2 cycles, I was pretty well ready to leave the Liberals. I can tell you what, like, she's an ex-ABC talking head. She's the most vacuous human being I've ever met, and she's been through about 3 different chameleon cycles. And for her to stand up and say, you know, we commend the government for following the opposition's lead on this, and basically, like, I would just watch that. I can't even imagine what it would have been like for you in the room, Malcolm. We were on stream, and
that was galling. That was good.
Oh, just shocking, like just absolutely shameless. And that's I suspect, and I want to ask you about this actually, Malcolm, what you think the odds are that Parliament doesn't sit again before the election, because that may well be the final image, mental image and message that voters hear from the coalition in this term of Parliament.
Jordan, it's an interesting question. Many people ask it. I usually just say to them, I don't know the future. I deal in data and evidence, so I can't tell. It's speculation. I have no idea, really, honestly. There are some people saying it will happen. Some people are saying it'll be held in May. I don't know, so I don't comment, really. But either way, we've got a toss up between Tweedledum and Tweedledummer. That's what most people think. So what we've got to show is there's another choice: the Uni Party versus the Freedom Parties.
I think that Malcolm, just to jump in there, they obviously have given themselves that option by doing this mass bill passing where they just rammed everything through almost without debate. And this is a pox on both houses when it comes to the Uni Party, because the only reason that was rammed through is that it didn't have opposition from the Liberal National Coalition. So this is what they call inside the Canberra bubble. I don't know if you would have probably heard this terminology perhaps from the major parties. They call it non-contro legislation, which means it's not controversial. Except this was bloody controversial. It had opposition from non-major parties, and it had opposition from a whole heap of Australian citizens, as is evident in the 1,500 submissions that went in, which is just a record. I mean, that would have to be the record shortest time for the submissions, probably the record shortest time for an inquiry, at least in the history of Parliament as I have experienced it. And it would probably have to be a near bloody record for the number of submissions to get in, in a 24-hour period anyway.
Well, undersold it there. It was 15,000, not 1,500.
15,000.
We have the Free Speech Union to thank. The team at the Free Speech Union are excellent, and they've developed a range of engines and tools to help people write submissions. And one of the funny things that happened during the sort of opposition to the MAD legislation from outside the Parliament, I spoke with our good friend, not really for me, but Glenn Drury from Payman's office. And I said, oh, what's the senator thinking about how she voted? And he said, oh, I suppose you think it's very clever that you're spamming us with all these emails. I've got a staff dedicated to just responding to all these emails. It's just taking up all our resources. And I thought, great, that's terrific.
There's no doubt that worked on the crossbench. No doubt whatsoever. And also the misinformation and disinformation bill was withdrawn, as you know, after relentless pressure from the citizens. And so that was wonderful.
Yeah. And
so you said before, George, that it was 2 steps forward and 1 giant step back. And I think that might be the correct way of looking at how the coalition was evolving. We've got to say, for the nation as a whole, defeating misinformation was standing still successfully. And now we've taken 1 step back. So actually, as a nation, our policy has just got net worse. We had 2 attacks on freedom of speech, parried 1, got hit by the other. We're still slowly getting hit. And as Word of Rob says, now I'm just the quote bringing up at the bottom of the screen, the Libs say they want to address misinformation anyway. They just want to do it with a different bill. So it's still a pretty scary environment for the state of the union.
They introduced it, John. They introduced it in the first place 4 years ago under Morrison.
Yeah,
Morrison
correct.
And Joyce.
We'll introduce crushing authoritarianism, but we'll just do it with a little bit added sprinkles.
And if they were true to their values, because they have these, we believe statements, and that was the reason actually I joined the National Party in the first place, when I read the we believe statements, like, this is what I believe in, and they actually were meaningful. They weren't just all motherhood statements back in those days. But anyway, like, some of the values are, privacy, freedom, liberty, the worth of the individual and the and human dignity and all that sort of stuff.
But George, how well does that poll? Apparently, this age restriction for kids polls well, mate. That's what I keep hearing. I don't know who they're asking, but
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on the polling, but okay, yes. If you ask parents, do you want to prevent kids from accessing harmful material online? Yes. All of them are going to say yes.
Do you want to pay zero tax?
Yes. Yeah, right. But
there's going to be a lot of people that say yes. Why don't we do that?
But this is the thing, right? Like I was talking to some MPs. I'm like, hang on, your justification is that it polls well. Well, why don't you just fucking run a poll that says, "Do you like ice cream?" Like it's a nonsensical poll unless it's actually. If you don't actually care about everything that's on your "We Believe" statement and you just care about winning the election, then the question is it a vote mover? Right? And I do not believe that there is a parent at home who's going to go to the election after 13 interest rate rises, the economy in the complete toilet, who's going to go had the coalition oppose the age verification bill. I do not believe that they're going to go to the election and go, I was going to vote for the coalition, but I'm not now because they haven't enacted a stupid bill to stop my teenager from going on TikTok.
And look, Brian, I'll agree with you and disagree with you. I think it is a vote mover. It's just going to be a vote mover away from the coalition and to
from disaffected liberals
in our party. And I think that this all flows from the long-held trend and tradition of the Liberal Party of taking their base for granted and assuming that they'll just lay back and think of England, and then when the time comes, still rock up. And then when the time comes, still rock up to hand out how to vote cards in the pouring rain and all that sort of stuff. Because in the past, they've had no choice. And I think that's what Dutton thinks. Dutton and his advisors think, look, yes, we'll get grumbling from the base. They won't like it, but they'll rally when we need them, and they'll just keep staying in the abusive relationship.
Well, Jordan, there's a really important figure, a couple of figures to back you up. A few decades ago, it was 93% who voted for the Uni Party, Liberal or Labor. Now it's under 2/3, and it's been declining consistently.
Yeah, and look, I wouldn't be surprised, Malcolm, if in places like Victoria, the majors got 30%.
Yeah,
well, I think you're right.
So can I just finish this thought very quickly about the the We Believe statements? If the parties actually were true to what they traditionally are supposed to believe in and the values that hold, then actually the Liberal and National parties would put up, after the next election, if they win, and it looks like they might, which is a turn-up for a first-term Labor government, but they would put up a bill of the kind that I actually put up in the dying days of the Scott Morrison Parliament, and that was a bill to actually stop censorship online, stop these foreign-owned big tech platforms from censoring online, because they are platforms, not publishers. And if they want to be publishers with, editorial guidelines, which are otherwise known as community guidelines on social media, then they should be liable for everything on there that's defamatory. They can't have it both ways. So, that's what I'd be doing, protecting actually the political and philosophical discussion of Australian citizens on the internet, which is the new town square, rather than trying to actually censor them further, because I'd say many people watching right now, and probably everyone on here bar Malcolm, because they're scared to do it to MPs, I know, has probably been in some way pinged on social media.
No, they've got me.
They got you.
Me.
Oh,
my Facebook is hammered. I've been suspended on YouTube twice. Well, shall I say it? Ivermectin. I've had 39 videos taken down. Sorry, everyone's just been cancelled. 39 videos taken down by YouTube. One of them was up there for 12 months, and I was given a 2-week suspension. And one of my staff called up, and that was commuted to 1 week with no evidence presented. So it's capricious. It's bullshit.
This is my point. This is a sitting senator. This is a member of parliament who actually can't get out his message to the town square or via the town square to the Australian people, because we have foreign censors that are actually targeting him. There's a black mark on his name now. They're looking at Malcolm Roberts' Facebook, his YouTube, all the rest of it. And that is actually what a Liberal government that actually held true to its values should actually be tackling, not trying to censor us further. That's quite ridiculous.
Agreed.
Apologies for having internet trouble on my end, but apparently everything went swimmingly without me. So I don't know what that says about how useful or needed I am. But
in quality.
Now I know George can't stay with us for too much longer, but I have gotten a message from Craig Kelly saying he's actually able to join us, which would be great.
Good.
Oh, we'll do the tag team.
All right,
I'll go out.
I'll get a link to. I'll get a link to Craig in a second. I just also wanted to note there was a message coming in that people couldn't access this video on X. It is on X. It's just not on the ATA channel, which to our embarrassment, isn't premium. Cheapskates that we are. My X account's premium, so it's going live on my X. ATA is now pointing to that. You can find it if you go to John Humphreys 99, or if you go to the ATA X account, and hopefully, Jordan and Brian in the background, I'm sure, are just busily tapping away to share it on their X account as well. So you will be able to find us on X if you prefer to give your money and eyeballs to Elon Musk as opposed to whoever it is that's behind YouTube.
Facebook
Google.
has improved slightly, John and George, since Elon Musk came in.
Yeah.
Because he's now got competition. It has improved. So, but marginally, and it's still completely stifling us. And I mean that.
Yeah, look, he's sort of making noises like he wants to be part of the club, and he's going along to UFC fights with Trump and all that sort of stuff, and sitting in the front row. But whenever he tries to do something normal, like a normal human, he just looks like a complete alien. He's on a different planet.
He's just at that sort of high level of high functioning super autism. So I mean,
he might be a libertarian then. In fairness,
yeah, true. Yeah, I mean,
all right, I'm going to have to depart, guys. I'm sorry. I'll thank you very much, and thank you again, Senator Roberts, for all you're doing for the Australian people.
Thank you, George, and likewise, mate. Because Citizen Go that needs to get even stronger.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, George.
Thanks a lot, George.
See ya.
Just talking of tech bro billionaires and social media, it is a bit of a separate tangent, but yeah, Facebook has improved slightly. I really would caution conservatives against it. I'm seeing it online a lot where conservatives are saying, oh, Mark Zuckerberg's sort of trying to ingratiate himself with Trump again and he's seen the light. No, he hasn't. He's a snake and he's trying to carve out deals to survive. He did this back in 2018 during the midterms back then when Trump was raising the prospect of coming after social media for them deplatforming conservative voices. He tried to ingratiate himself with the Trump administration then. Conservative influencers bought it hook, line, and sinker and started saying that Zuckerberg was one of us. Then the 2020 election rolled around and Zuckerberg deplatformed everyone ahead of the election. So he's a snake. Do not trust him. Everything he does is a coordinated play to try and screw all of you over.
I love that.
I have a slightly more positive take on Zuckerberg, which is that he's a spineless, gutless cuck of a coward, which is my positive take on him. Because I feel like in his darker moments, in his quieter moments, I think he might kind of know that the free speech side is right. And I think he wishes he lived in a world where he could get away with doing the right thing. But I think he's such a sort of pathetic cuck of a man that he just allows the people he's surrounded with and the culture he's surrounded with to push him around.
If that's the case, then like weak men are obviously the worst kind of men as opposed to a strong man who's.
I say it's a defense of him. It's not much of a defense, as you could tell with the nature of the language. But I suspect he's not a malevolent actor. He's just weak and unable to stand up to cultural pressures of the day, which is a very sad thing. And Elon is the opposite, right? I mean, Elon clearly is willing to stand up to cultural pressures of the day. And that's the great thing about him. It doesn't have to mean he's always right. What we're missing at the moment in the world is not just people who are correct. Sure, it'd be nice to have more of them too. But what we're really missing at the moment in the world of politics and business is people with courage. And when you find someone with courage, that is so refreshing that even when they're wrong, sometimes it's like, screw it. I need the courage in the system so bad, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
The only arbiter of truth, as you know, John, well, everyone here knows, is free, open, public debate. That's the only arbiter of truth, apart from maybe in court, where hopefully the judges are objective.
No one answered your question during the hearing.
As an officer of the court, I couldn't possibly comment on that statement without getting in trouble. But
I said possibly the judge.
I was going to say, Malcolm, actually, George mentioned something earlier, talking about Alex and Matt and how they were able to sort of propose some of these amendments. I actually noted your comment on Thursday that the amendments really are quite toothless when you look at it, because all they're doing in requiring that another form of identification or verification be provided, and if one is, then digital ID can be used.
No, you mean the government's amendment?
Yes, indeed. Sorry,
that's right. That's what I pointed out in my speech.
So I think
correct.
We say the government's amendments, but really it was worked out between the government and the coalition. That was sort of like the coalition saying, look, we need a bit of cover. We're getting a bit of heat here. We really want to be able to pass this bill. We just need you to say that it's not compulsory. But it's going to be not compulsory in the same way that the internet or electricity or any number of things that are ubiquitous in our life, and you could go without them if you wanted to, but it would be a very, very inconvenient sort of life. And I totally agree with what you said on the night, that it's really a complete cat's paw. It doesn't actually advance the situation at all, because you're just going to end up with a situation where they could say, look, sure, using the Centrelink example, you could go in and line up for 3 hours and go to use Centrelink and not use a digital ID. But of course, who's going to do that? And I think it's the same with social media.
Yeah, I think on the same sort of the same sort of issue with the age verification bill is also, I see a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll just use a VPN and so will my kids and we'll get around that. And yeah, sure, you can do that, but only a few people will do it. Maybe VPNs will double in usage or triple in usage, but unless you have the vast majority of people doing that, what you're still going to end up with is a society in Australia who are conscious that their online identity is linked to some form of actual identity, which then has the secondary effect of stifling online speech, because they'll always have something in the back of their head saying, if I criticize X, will it come back to haunt me? So VPNs might be a workaround for people like us who are just terminally online and want to say what we want to say. But for the average person out there, they won't use it, and then we won't have that sort of catalyst of a large amount of people willing to speak out. So the bill needs to be repealed, and that's why we need to get more people into Parliament to actually do that.
Well, just remember, it's legalising, basically, well, the misinformation and disinformation bill is legalising what the Department of Health and the Department of Home Affairs did during the COVID mismanagement and deceit. That's all. They already did some of this misinformation dobbing into to Facebook and Instagram. That's all it is. But except now it's really strong because, as John pointed out in his introduction, the government basically forces the tech companies to over-censor the misinformation disinformation bill, which fortunately was not passed, forces them to over-censor and no penalties for under-censoring. So, and then if the tech companies don't do their job, then the government will take care of it.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like the problem with the age verification thing is Albo goes, well, look, we're not requiring ID. We don't need sort of some official government verification. All we need is biometrics to tell us whether you're 16 or not. And of course, any system that the digital platforms use when they're facing massive fines for not complying, they're going to err on the side of caution. They're not going to say, oh yeah, our biometrics say that person looks about 16. They're going to say, okay, here's a range, 2 years either side, block. And if you want, like if you turn 16, you're little Timmy on your 16th birthday and you think, yay, now I'm a man, I can use social media, which in itself is just the most ridiculous thing to say about a society. But if he wants to use social media day one of turning 16, he's going to have to use some sort of verified government ID, whether it be digital or otherwise.
I was going to say, I find it amazing that there's an accusation that you'll have to use digital ID. And then they say, oh, no, don't worry, you'll have a choice. You could either use digital ID or you could take 3 photocopies of your birth certificate and translate it into Swahili and get it a certified document, et cetera, et cetera. You've got a choice between those two things. We all know that they pick the digital ID out of those two.
Play the dragon and you climb up
and then
the tower.
They go one step further and say, oh, don't worry. You've got another option. Maybe we won't require either of those. Maybe we will just have the camera be constantly monitoring everything you do online. So they have an in-depth profile of everything about your life. And that's the way they'll be able to make a good guess at your age. Is that supposed to make us feel better? That is a bizarre response, I think.
What sort of messages is it sending to the people under 16? Because there was a Twitter, an ex-post that said, things you can do in New South Wales if you're under 16. Learn to fly an aeroplane. In fact, you can get your pilot's license. Learn to fly an aeroplane. Possess and use a firearm. Drive at 80 kilometres per hour in a go-kart. Captain any non-commercial boat up to 20 knots. Own a spear gun for recreational fishing. Abseiling, scuba diving. Join the Australian Army Cadet Corps. Drag racing. Attempt to change your sex. Well, you can't change your sex no matter what you do, but you can attempt to change your appearance. Can use puberty blockers. Can be turned to digital ID. Things you can't do now or soon: Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You won't be able to use Facebook messengers to connect with grandparents, and you can't share your worries with friends on social media. This is a major social impediment, and it undermines parents. That's the fundamental thing that I dislike, as well as impinging on free speech.
That post made me miss Peter Phelps dearly. I remember when I was in the Young Lives back in sort of 2013, 2014, and he was like the John Ruddock of the day. He was just basically fighting the good fight from the New South Wales Upper House, and unfortunately sort of met the fate that many solid people within the Liberal Party do. And I hope that, I know Alex is all good. He's got the numbers sorted out in South Australia. He's on top of the ticket, but I hope Matt sort of does okay at the next round of pre-selections.
Matt's pretty sharp. It was Peter Phelps, by the way. I just checked on X. It was Peter
Phelps.
Yeah. Just talking of pre-selections, I mean, this is the problem is that the coalition often has a fair few really solid people that are quite, based. But they get pushed out. Corey Bernardi, Erica Betts, Amanda Stoker. And I'm concerned that the same thing will happen to people like Antic. It's happened to Rennick. Maybe it'll happen to Matt as well. These are, very solid people who were holding the coalition to account on trying to stick with their "We Believe" statement. My concern is that they will just get turfed.
This is one of the silver linings of the COVID cloud, and they're pretty dark clouds the way COVID was mismanaged deceitfully. But people started waking up. People never heard about Agenda 21, which was implemented signed by this. We were signed up to UN Agenda 21 by Paul Keating's government, and yet the biggest perpetrator of implementing it was John Howard, and both parties since then have done that. The Paris Agreement. Scott Morrison came out and said before the 2019 election, Paris Agreement is out. He signed up. Net zero, was out. He signed up within 18 months. We are not looking after our own country, and we've been sold out by both both cheeks of the Uni Party.
The Uni Party just shut Malcolm down, I think.
No, I didn't
know whether it was me or him that was shut down.
Two cheeks. I have a saying I've used publicly: two cheeks is the same arsehole. Liberal Party, Labor Party, and the arsehole just happens to be the UN and the World Economic Forum. I mean, that's being crude, but it's being accurate. There are no alternatives. Look at their major policies: Big Australia, energy. They're all similar. It's just that they point fingers at each other and do what Sarah Henderson did and said, "We've led the way out of this." No, you haven't. You just led them in deeper.
I think Sarah Henderson.
For any aspiring conservatives out there who want to get into politics and learn, the ropes, my advice would be, or libertarians, my advice would be, look at what Sarah Henderson does and do the opposite.
In her actual portfolio, right, in education, she has just complained for like 4 years about Gonski 2.0. That's it. Like, all she wants is more funding for a department and a portfolio that shouldn't be a federal responsibility anyway. It's
here.
Oh, mate, yeah. I'll tell you what, Malcolm, I don't know if you're looking forward to it as much as I am, but I think the first item on the list for Doge in America of abolishing the Federal Department of Education, if they do that before the federal election here, good gravy.
Yep. We've been calling for that for years, and same with the Department of Health federally. There's so many things. America and Australia are being plagued by centralisation, which John knows for many, many years.
Lots of people in the chat want us to have been slowly pushing us towards the direction of, well, let's talk about the politics of what do we do, and the constant theme of, one nation and libertarians, the solution somewhere there, and put them together, keep them apart, whatever. Now, we will get to that because that's a fun topic and everyone's waiting for it. So I'll just keep them on bated breath to make sure they can't leave the live stream by saying it's coming soon. But before we get to that, I'll force you to listen to me and say something else, which is, look, I want to make a slightly different case for why the this age verification, and I don't think we should call it the under 16 ban, right? Because that's letting them frame it the way that makes it sound sympathetic to parents. It should be called the online age verification bill because everyone has to verify their age to be able to then get online. So that's the one point. And the point about it needs to be repealed because it's a step towards digital ID and surveillance. And with that tone of voice, I don't mean to downplay that. There's a lot of truth to all of that. But I think there's another really important follow-up counterpunch to why this needs to be repealed. And that is, even on its own grounds, even on the basis of making the case to protect the kids, it doesn't do that. And in some ways, it actually takes us into a more dangerous place. Now, we've discussed before.
It'll send them to 4chan.
People will have access to VPNs. People will have access to other websites that are probably going to be just as bad or worse. And you, Brian, a lot of us, people of our vintage or above, might not rush to VPNs. I already have one. You all should. Everyone should have one anyway, by the way. But the younger generation, if they want to get on, there'll be workarounds very easily.
Oh, yeah.
So what this is going to do is young people will have access to things that their parents might not want them to see online. But now the parents will have a false sense of security. They'll think, oh, the government's doing it for me. There is a problem. They understand there's a problem and I need to solve it. No, I don't. No. Albanese and Dutton have solved it. I can sit back. I don't have to worry. I don't have to go into the bedroom and check what website they're on their phone. And this is going to give parents a false sense of security and probably lead to worse outcomes. So even
I don't think
on
it's probably,
the
I think
merits,
you're right. I think it will, right? Because you'll just have a scenario where you've got a parent who's complacent, and then little Timmy's flicking between tabs of poll on 4chan and then the dark web because he can't get on TikTok to waste his time. So
there's an important reason I'm making this point, because the first argument we were all making, I don't disagree with it, but I suspect most people who are sympathetic to that argument are probably already the people that are outraged and cheering us on. And it's great to have a base, but we might have to convince some people and change some minds if we want to get the numbers to force the major parties to reassess. And I think the argument that really helps push the needle and get this to being an overwhelming majority position taps into the knee-jerk reactions of some parents who are genuinely worried, I'd say in a lot of instances with good reason. But this bill does the opposite of what it says on the tin. So for online safety purposes, we need to repeal this. And I think if we can get that idea out there, we can help build a majority against this legislation that goes beyond the people who are already tuned in. So to the 1,200 people already listening along at home, it's great that you're here. Let's share a message more widely so that we can get more people to be as outraged as we are. And somebody asked in the messages, sorry, the messages are coming in a bit too quick for me to keep putting them up as we go. But someone asked the question, how are we going to repeal it? Well, the answer to that is in the next government, the Greens are already against it. The crossbenchers against it. We need to switch one major party. Right. And at the moment, that's going to be difficult because they're both dining in on saying how proud they are of doing this. They're saying they're proud of it because they think they have the numbers of public support. If the public support can be shifted, if we can actually convince enough people in the middle to say, wait a second, this is backfiring, it's going to backfire, it's got all these other stings in the tail, it's got a bunch of things we should be scared about, and it doesn't even work, and we can get that to 51%, 55, 60%, one of the major parties, through pure Machiavellian purposes, not because they have any principles, will decide to take a change of tack so they can maximize their vote, and then the crossbench is already on side and it can be repealed. Often bad legislation can't be repealed because the Greens have the balance of power and the Greens support like all bad legislation as a point of principle, it seems. But in this instance, we have a
precedent of this as well. I mean, there's a lot of doomers and black pillars out there, and sometimes I'm one of them. But the coalition was the party that enacted legislation to ban vaping in this country at the beginning, right, and make it a prescription product. They now support a legal, regulated market if they were to win the next election. So they say. Obviously, there's a difference between policies in opposition and policies if they're elected. But that's an example of a major party shifting their policy based on seeing the actual failures of bad policy and seeing that it actually is a net winner to legalize and regulate products such as that. So if it can be done on what is arguably a relatively fringe issue like vapes for 2% of the population, I think it could absolutely be done when it comes to social media bans, as John pointed out, which involve age verification for everyone, not just under 16s. So, black pillars and doomers get out because it can be.
Can I just say that in the YouTube, there's a little debate going on by a few people saying parents just need to parent. And look, I think that's good advice in general. But if we're relying on the idea of changing people's parenting philosophy in order to win this political debate, that's a long road to hoe. I mean, that's you're not going to convince everyone to change their parenting philosophy before it's too late and this bill has already caused enough damage. So we need to change minds now. And that doesn't just mean berating parents for being bad parents. That's not going to win us votes. No. We need to go to those parents and tell them, like, we understand your concerns. We understand. I'm sympathetic. I really am. I've got young kids. I'm worried about what's coming down the road for social media. I'm sympathetic to this, and I can understand why parents instinctively go, oh, good, someone's going to help me here. We need to reach out saying, I understand your concerns. I sympathize. This legislation doesn't do it. It does the opposite of it. So, join us. And then once we've got rid of this legislation, we can try to work out a way to make it easier for you to be able to make good parenting decisions and help your kids. But I'd say we shouldn't be berating parents with a different attitude here. We should be reaching out, saying we understand their concerns, and then explaining to them why this is going to backfire.
I think you're right. Your comment about language is entirely appropriate. It's the same with everything. It's always they drive us to use their language, and I refuse to do that. But I did get caught up. You're right. It is the online age verification bill. But there are so many things, John, that point to the fact that this is not about This is not about keeping 16-year-olds safe. I just rattled off a list from Peter Phelps and added a couple, but also the porn. I raised the porn discussion in the inquiry, and Senator Roberts, because you can access porn under 18 right now. Oh, what about that? Oh, Senator Roberts, that's taken care of. How are you taken care of? Oh, we've already got laws in place for that. Oh, really? What do they require? Just you to say, as far as I know, I'm told that it's just, tell me if I'm wrong or not, it's just a matter of saying, yes, I'm over 18.
Yes, from first-hand experience, yes, you just over 18, and I can check now, and we can, no.
But look, no, you're absolutely right, and I think Matt Canavan's forcing the concession from them on the very limited time they did have with the experts was terrific. Like I thought his sort of saying, YouTube allowed, yes, okay, Pornhub, yes, what, it just did not make any sense. And look, libertarians don't believe things should be banned, but it highlights, as you say, the fact that this is not about keeping children safe.
No, not at all. I introduced that argument, and Matt finished it off. He did it really well. He kicked them over the cliff because he had more time. So that was wonderful. But that's the other thing, John, that we can do. We can work together because we already work very, very closely with Ralph Babette from the UAP, Jared Rennick, Matt Canavan on climate. Fortunately, he's back out of the alarmist camp and he's back into the truth camp. Alex Antic, and there are a couple more. Oh, by the way, Richard Colbeck abstained from the vote.
I know. After
and
this,
he spoke very positively about it.
I know, huffing and puffing and saying how bad it was and everything, and then nowhere to be seen. That was the first thing I checked on the dynamic red Malcolm, and I knew it would be the case. I just knew.
Yes, but at least it shows that Richard Colbeck is aware of what the public think.
Yes,
and what John's point, I think John's point is a very, very good one. He makes 2 points. Don't criticise parents, and none of us are really. But the other one is build a coalition of people and highlight the dangers of this bill from the age verification, online age verification. I'll get that right yet.
John, I can just see in the chat there's a number of people asking us about the free membership the Libertarian Party have been offering to ex-Liberal Party members. I'm very pleased to say that's now in the low triple figures since Thursday night, since the bill passed. We had to wait, you see, until they actually failed. Like, we knew they were going to fail for 3 days, but apparently they would have regarded it as some high betrayal if we didn't wait for them to fail. Officially.
Let's play out the pantomime here. But Jordan, what is this you're talking about? Is there some new scheme that you've been involved in? Could you explain it to me? Tell me more.
Yeah, no, look, so we I sort of thought, because I'm not in Parliament like Malcolm is yet, unfortunately, and so I was sort of thinking, how can I try to help to try to maximise the transaction cost of them doing this? And yeah, had a bit of a chat with a few people who are still very touched in with the internal dynamics in the Libs, and they sort of confirmed what I suspected, that it's deeply divisive within the party room and within the membership base of the Liberal Party. And so I just looked down the camera and said, if you don't change course, we're going to punish you. And look, I was hoping for the sake of the country that they would heed that ultimatum, but unfortunately for them they didn't, and for us they didn't as a country. But we've seen a veritable sort of stampede of members from the Liberal Party, many of them actually over 55, which is very interesting. And I actually had a couple of Liberal Party members messaging me on the Tuesday and Wednesday saying, do we have to wait until Thursday? So that was quite funny as well.
Gee, Isabel Clare's comment's a really strong one. Yeah. We've had a lot of people coming to us as well, Jordan, saying, they're abandoning Liberal, Labor, both of them. We've been lifelong Labor, we've been lifelong Liberal. We're never doing it again, voting One Nation. That's what's happening. And how would you do this after disinformation bill got trounced? How would you possibly think of doing this? So there are so many factors in this debate that point to higher forces driving the Liberals. They just don't care.
I think you're right
Just
because
quickly, for,
the-
editorial on this is most people watching this would be aware of who's in this room, of course, because they're a very esteemed crowd. But when Malcolm is saying we, he's referring to the One Nation Party. When Jordan Dittloff is saying we, he's referring to the Libertarian Party. Both of these gentlemen are going to be candidates for the Senate for their respective parties at the upcoming federal election. But if you enjoy listening to both of them, fear not, they're not running against each other directly. Malcolm Roberts is running in Queensland. Jordan Dittloff running in the Socialist Republic of Victoria. So when they're saying we, this is the Libertarian Party and One Nation, a couple of their most well-spoken, respectable gentlemen joining us this evening to share their wisdom.
It is odd
There
doing
is,
live
there is
stream with
there is a
with
real we there, John, and that is that while I recommend that you put One Nation 1, I recommend you put the other freedom parties 2, 3, 4 before the Liberals. And so if we don't get in, our vote goes ultimately to the Libertarians, United Australia, whoever it goes to. And that's important. We can work together so long as the people who vote for us are disciplined about putting, if they vote for Libertarian 1, vote for One Nation 2. So long as that happens.
Absolutely. And Warren Pickering here in Victoria, we invited him to speak at our free speech rally. I know, Malcolm, you invited John to speak at the digital ID rally you had up in Queensland. And I really think that, we do have a massive opportunity this cycle. I think last time people thought that COVID was the time that the majors would sort of sink to their lowest. And I've always said, and I think I've seen Malcolm say it before as well, this cycle is when the credit card debt from COVID falls due and people actually realise the cost of this COVID madness and total lack of any proportionality. So I think that more people now will be waking up to the fact that really, as Malcolm said, it's two cheeks of the same arsehole. That is true.
Yeah.
And just on that, we've got a third COVID.
There's a couple of people in the comments that are asking, like what made the Liberals go down this path? And Malcolm sort of touched on it before, but I just want to unpack that a bit. Any logical way that you look at it doesn't really make sense because, Peter Dutton, to his credit, has done an excellent job over the last 2.5 years of up until now, bringing back a lot of the disaffected voters that after ScoMo did go across to One Nation and the Libertarians and UAP. And as an example of that, the Liberals last election almost won the seat of Werriwa. And the only reason they missed out was because a lot of disaffected Liberals went across the Libertarian candidate in that seat. And that's a Labor stronghold seat. They hadn't won it before in a very long time. All of the polling that I'd been seeing indicated that they actually might win Werriwa this time around. But I don't think that that's the case anymore. So why would the party sleepwalk into supporting legislation that's just going to send those disaffected voters back to the minor parties unless, as Robert alluded to, Malcolm alluded to, the legislation has sort of come out of the bowels of some sort of deep state, goblin cave that is just trying to enact this overarching legislation because the polling that they point to is shonky. It kind of just says parents support protecting kids. Okay. There's no logical reason behind it. Every single staffer you talk to who works for a coalition MP tells you that they think it's stupid. A lot of coalition MPs tell you privately that they think it's stupid. And yet they all sleepwalk into it. So, sure, I haven't got the tinfoil hat to put on. It's sitting, over in the other room. But if it walks like a duck and it smells and it talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And in this case, it just seems like a corrupt bit of policy that's been handed down from high and pushed through.
Well, look, I totally agree. And I think I've always said with this sort of policy trend that the whips of the masters are at their back. It's against self-preservation. So there is absolutely some sort of external impetus towards this kind of policy. And I'm sure Malcolm would have been following it as well. The Pandemic Preparedness Treaty from the World Health Organization that ended up getting scuppered, that had provisions in it that actually related specifically to misinformation and disinformation in the bowels of that treaty. And you just see it resurface. And it just, someone said earlier, it feels as though you're just blocking one shot and then taking another. I think it's like you've got a goalie and it's really a single goalie in front of a big goal in the Freedom Line crossbench at the moment, trying to stop bad globalist legislation getting through. And they might block one, but then 3 more balls go past them. And it is. They're just relentless, and they just keep coming back to it, and they're prepared to play the long game. And I think we do need to be vigilant, especially with the misinformation and disinformation legislation. I think that the coalition likely will propose some kind of e-safety policy heading into the election. And I think we need to be very wary.
You're right, and the age verification legislation to me seemed like a flanking effort, right? Like it seemed apparent that the digital ID and misinformation agenda started to fall over. More and more crossbench MPs were speaking out. More and more people were raising concerns. Even Crikey, who used to run a protection racket for the Labor Party, was starting to raise concerns about the misinformation and disinformation bill. And then out of nowhere, age verification comes up and gets rolled out simultaneously as a potential issue in other European nations as well. So I don't know, maybe I'm jumping at shadows, but it did seem like a flanking effort to me by people that just want to try and crack down on online anonymity in any way.
I think we've got to do what John says, and that is keep up the pressure and educate people as to the consequences of this. That's very clear. The other thing is that...
Can I just suggest... One thing that John is about to say now is that we're going to welcome a new guest to the circle, just in case people were getting sick of our faces being in this order. We're going to mix that up. We're just going to take someone, just a random citizen off the street. I'm sure nobody that's put their life, blood and sweat into defending nearly every righteous cause over the last couple of decades. It'll just be the first person we find off the street. Who can we find here? Oh, look, that's Craig Kelly. Welcome, Craig.
Good day, boys. How you going?
Good on you, Craig.
How you going, Malcolm?
Very well, mate. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How are you, mate?
So, Craig, help us out here. We were just trying to work out whether this online age verification bill was a good or a bad thing, and whether it indicated that the Liberal Party is in a solid place where they actually believe in their principles, or could there be something amiss?
So you have to laugh at that. You really trigger it. Look, a couple of things that surprised me. It hands the e-safety commissioner an enormous amount of power. Now, even if you're in favour of saying we should do this, we should have age verification, you would think you would come up with, let's explain how actually we're going to do it and put that in the legislation to hand these extraordinary powers to, what is effectively to a woman that has shown that she definitely has a grudge against X. She's an disgruntled ex-employee of that company.
You were going to say
Malcolm Turnbull appointee, remember?
Yeah, that's right. She's shown how she wants to control the internet around the world with some of those court cases, like how she's, I want to test my powers. She made that statement. I think what was the guy from Rebel News out of Canada, and she basically said, I don't have to apply the First Amendment, and that doesn't apply in Australia, so I can get away with these things. And they're giving her this power. I just found that one of the extraordinary things.
Well, she didn't come out of nowhere.
No, that's right. Now, how is she actually going to do this? So they've given her a complete and utter blank check about how she's going to do it. Secondly, there's the timing. Why would you rush it through, with such haste and such speed when it doesn't start the 2025? That doesn't make sense as well. And then you look through the amendments that they put in. Remember, everyone said, you're going to bring in a digital ID, you're going to bring in a digital ID. And Malcolm, you said it, that you read one paragraph and it says, the platforms will not ask for and be able to ask for a government-issued digital ID. And the next paragraph says, except for, if you do something else. So it's basically, authorising and that's, you could have some type of, if you read through the explanatory memorandum of the bill, it talks about having some other entity or some private sector entity that can control everyone's digital ID and issue it for these online platforms, and that would be the alternate to the government, which would probably be should have someone like BlackRock or Vanguard or something setting up a business to control everyone's digital ID, and you can have that one or the government one. Take your pick.
Well, I think just to add to that, Craig, the e-safety or the e-Karen didn't come out of nowhere. She is a sort of monster of the Biden administration. So my understanding is she used to work quite closely with a lady named Nina Jankowicz, Now, Nina Jankowicz briefly led the US Disinformation Governance Board and was actually open and vocal in her praise of the creation of the e-safety office in Australia and supportive of misinformation laws being passed here. And the objective of that was to effectively, America has First Amendment protections, which means that you can't really enact legislation that cracks down on free speech there. But if you can get countries that only have implied rights to political expression to crack down on online content in their country, and then you can carbon copy that legislation in other Western nations, you then sort of just create this standardized process where most media companies are likely to just update their sort of, that was and shut down content. And this was deliberate. And it was a deliberate a policy piece pushed by the Biden administration. So, it stinks.
And you've got to remember
Hillary Clinton. There's a very short video or a clip of Hillary Clinton saying we've got to start regulating the big tech platforms because they're losing control of their audience.
That's right.
And you've got to remember, you've got Peter Dutton as well, who reminded everyone that he thinks Julian McGrant is one of the finest public servants in Canberra. I think that you should just put that.
We'll be running that again.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But look,
can I just make the mistake of finding good comments from smart people in the chat, highlighting them and then arguing against them while they're not here to defend themselves. Look, I gotta say, Lee Hazel and Scott Harrison are two people who I think generally are intelligent and have their heart in the right place and often making good points. But I gotta say, this point here, I think it's one that I used to hold to a lot. I think it's almost exactly the wrong way around. The bureaucrats are running most of our government these days. The politicians are following the instructions they're given. Just think about this. If you're a minister of anything, you've got, you hire 4 university students who are working their way up, young Liberal or young Labor, hackersphere. They're not policy experts. And then, so you got 4 of them and you're spending, 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day trying to get reelected. Oh dear. Am I back?
No,
you're back. You're good.
Okay. And then you've got a department with 10,000, 20,000 very intelligent, motivated people with very fancy suits and briefcases full of lots of research. And they've been doing this for years. And they come to you, those 20,000 bureaucrats come to you and say, this is what you need to do. And you as an exhausted politician with a brief that's far too big and everyone trying to call your names. And they say, look, if you just follow the bureaucracy and the media and the academia, we won't criticize you. You'll look smart. The politicians are being led. We need to go after the bureaucrats, academic and media elite that are the ones leading them if we want to change direction.
You're absolutely right. Just to add to that, John, Craig, you might remember this when you were working, as a coalition MP. The Morrison government, cut the bureaucracies. But what they did is they just combined the bureaucracies, right? So there used to be the case where if you had a strong MP who was a minister, he could hold a department to task, and he could hold a portfolio to task, and he could really try and cut through the crap. Then ScoMo comes along and he cuts the bureaucracies, but he actually just merges numerous bureaucracies into one. So the amorphous blob just got bigger to the point that a lot of these ministers are just the blob runs rings around them. So look, I agree with you, John. It's not the politicians; it is the bureaucracy.
I'll vouch that 100%. Having been there and part of that, Liberal government we're in government from 2013, 16, and 19 with Morrison sort of thing. That is exactly what I saw happen. You would see people, and so the people they promoted to the ministries. Were people that would sort of go along with things, would never sort of kick up a stink or never question them, sort of thing. Yeah, and I can see, like, how could Hunt go into the health bureaucracy? He's not, and he has no expertise in the area of health. He's got all these people, medical doctors, so-called experts, telling him what to do. He just goes along with them. It was the same with, I go with good mates with Josh. Josh was the energy minister and climate change minister, and the bureaucracies we'd have like these backbench meetings, and he'd be, as the minister would sort of come along and present what the legislation was that he was coming up, and we'd be around one of those big tables in Canberra, and there'd sort of be maybe about a dozen MPs, and behind Josh, he'd have another dozen people of his ministry. and they were basically running the show. They were basically saying what was being done and giving so, and half the time it was all bullshit they were talking about. And so you're right, it is. You can swap the ministers around. Like even if you talk at the current Bowen in climate change and energy, you can swap him around, but whoever else they put there, he's going to be just exactly the same because all the policies are going to be written by the bureaucrats down there.
Yeah,
but really need
ultimately
Jordan,
in a democracy, it's the politicians who are responsible. Well, actually, it's the people who are responsible. And the people have been asleep in our country for quite a while. We need to put more pressure on the politicians because the politicians, if they back stupid bureaucrats, dishonest bureaucrats, fraudulent bureaucrats, the politicians are still responsible. So, Chris Bowen, he's telling lies all the time about climate, just absolute lies. And yet he's getting away with it because the Labor Party doesn't hold him accountable.
But Malcolm, I don't think
the people don't hold him accountable.
What are you talking about?
Sorry?
Like, there was one example down there. He was down at Wollongong and he was talking about BlueScope and the offshore wind turbines. And he said it was offshore wind is constant renewable power.
It's free.
You only have to go to I remember looking up the information they had, just to see what the capacity factor was. And there was very little difference in the capacity factor between those offshore wind turbines and what the onshore wind turbines was. It might have been like 30% compared to 25% or something, but it was still negligible difference. And he's there he actually believed that they kept on giving constant power. It was just such basic stuff.
I can't believe anyone can be that stupid, Craig. I just cannot believe that. I think he's just a dishonest liar.
Record over portfolios is, what he said, don't vote for us. He had that, was it the retirees tax? He wanted to, do on things at the last election. He lost the 2019 election almost single-handedly for the Labor Party. And it's just, he's mucked up everything. I can remember when I first started in 2010, he was small business minister and competition minister. He was completely out of his depth.
Elizabeth just nailed it. Excuse me, Craig. Elizabeth just nailed it. The LNP doesn't hold Bowen accountable. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because most of the LNP don't believe in this crap.
I'll come to you, Jordan, next, I promise, because you've been far too patient for a person with that much to say. The two people I picked on, who I've got to reiterate that I do think they're solid people, solid philosophically, smart people, and always worth listening to.
Just let it go.
I'm trying to be nice. Look, I pick on a lot of people, so I got to be respectful as well. Look, you're right here, Scott, but here's the thing. Speaking of the choir, most of the choir hasn't internalized this yet. So look, at the end of the day, a politician is the only one who can solve it. The bureaucrats aren't going to self-correct. The only one who can solve it is a politician. So they do cop a bit of the blame here. But the thing we need is a politician brave enough to just do mass sackings, mass deportations out of Canberra, as Vivek would say, the Vivekiism brought to Australia is, and without those mass sackings of the bureaucracy, everything else we say we're trying to achieve will not be achieved because we'll turn around, they'll still be there, and it'll all be undone once we're out of power. And so I'm trying to beat this drum here to reiterate and get it across, because I guarantee you the LNP has not internalized this. That if they don't fundamentally reorientate and massively shrink the bureaucracy, there is no path out of this, the path we're treading down now. And so that's why I keep repeating it. But yes, ultimately, as Malcolm and Scott and others, and I think Jordan was trying to say, ultimately, it's going to have to be a politician that does this. They're the only ones, a brave, principled politician, or actually it'll have to be more than one, because we'll need, 39 votes in the Senate at least. A bunch of brave, principled politicians are the only ones who can hopefully get this bureaucracy into line. So with that said, Jordan, what have I got right and wrong?
Once again, we're in furious agreement. I find it, sometimes I try really hard to disagree with you, John, and we're very argumentative with each other. We always land in the same place, and you've just given me the perfect segue to what I was going to say. And I agree with Malcolm, and I think what Craig's also saying is you cannot put lipstick on a pig. You can't change the face and sort of change the figurehead of these public service quangos. You've actually just got to cut. The time's come for us to take a chainsaw to the bloated public service and political class here in Australia. They've just, since the last term of the Howard government, it's just gone in one direction. And I don't think that the average person and the average voter in Australia actually understands how much out of control and how bloated and ineffective the public service has become. And we just need to start cutting.
People need to understand as well that the solution isn't. A lot of mainstream conservatives fall into this trap where they go, Well, what I'll do is I'll enact legislation that try and controls the bureaucracy, or I'll try and take the blob on myself. It's like, no, the blob always wins because you're in there for a term or maybe a Senate term or a couple of terms. They're there forever, and the blob will always win unless you kill the blob. So there's no tinkering around the edges. You need to do a melee, and you need to just start getting rid of these people, or getting rid of their jobs before I get accused of hate speech.
Government is evil generally. It's got to be small as possible. The worst form of government is massive central government because there's no competition.
Just on those numbers, I just can't remember off the top of the head. There's been extraordinary increase in public servants over the last 2 years. I did the numbers the other day. They're on one of the ABS websites. Was it 100,000 increase? It was just an astronomical number that they'd increased. And one of the concerns that I had with it, the big increases in Canberra. Now, my concern is that they're trying to gerrymander the ACT with the 2 senators. Remember, it was traditionally always one Liberal, one Labor, one Liberal, one Labor, and you generally have three from each state sort of thing at each election. But if you could gerrymander just the ACT and get 2 senators up in the ACT, it means that the Conservative side of politics has got to get 3 states that they win 4-2 to balance that out. And I think that's going to be very difficult to do. And the way they pull those public servants in to Canberra, I think it's going to be hard for the Liberals to win back that one of those 2 seats. And then you'll have a 2-0 leg up in Canberra, which will basically skew the balance of the Senate going forward, which will make it very, very difficult for a Conservative government in the lower house to also have the numbers in the upper house as well.
And that's if they actually keep the size. That's if they keep the size of Parliament the same, which, as we know, they were very, very close. I think they, at the last minute, got some sort of self-control where they realised, Pocock and co realised how bad it would look during a cost of living crisis if their solution was to actually increase the number of politicians in Canberra. But they came very close to that, and that might also have the effect of making more ACT and Northern Territory senators, which would exacerbate the problem Craig's talking about even more.
Look, it's not very important to what we're saying, but just going on the record now to say something unimportant and unlikely. I think the Liberals will win back the second Senate seats in the ACT. They only missed out by, I think, 1%. If there's a 1 or 2% swing to the coalition in their primary vote, they'll get over the line because they only need the 33.3%.
Yeah, but remember, if you've brought in another 5% in public servants, right?
Yeah, you're swaying the numbers and the demographics.
Yeah, the numbers there on the ABS website, and you'll see the real substantial number of both like ACT-based ACT bureaucrats for basically running the ACT, and also federal bureaucrats that are all based out of Canberra. The number is absolutely extraordinary, and I think you're normally right. The coalition should win it back. But because of this gerrymandering they've done with employing all these extra public servants, I'm not sure whether they actually will be able to get it back.
Well, they would win it back if we're talking about sort of
we can just put that one.
But we're not. We're talking about bureaucrats that work within the blob, and for the most part, the vast majority of them have a deep disdain for Conservatives. Let's just be honest about this. Most of the bureaucrats that ministers try and deal with when you have Conservatives in power are people that really dislike us. So you bring in another 100,000 of them. You're bringing in people that, like, ACT was the only state that overwhelmingly backed the Voice, right? Like they are just turbo leftists through and through.
The only state.
But I agree with all that. But I put my bid on the table, and I can be proved wrong in a couple of months' time, or I can come back and force you all to buy me a whiskey if I'm right. And look, I think it's trending that way. But I got to say, if Canberra is like a vacuum sucking in all the worst lefties in the country, then we can just build a wall around Canberra, make them pay for it, and just save the rest of the country. And I'm not saying drone strikes. That would not be something I would say.
I'm saying drone strikes.
Victoria's already lost, unfortunately.
That's a joke. The e-safety commissioner out there. Anyway, jokes are still allowed.
Good segue. Good
Hate
segue
speech.
opportunity here. Speaking of lost causes, we were talking before about what has gone wrong with your old party, Craig. Is it irredeemable? Is there a way out? Is there a path through internal pressure or external pressure or voodoo that would make them a better party? Or do we just burn them and dance on the ashes? Like, what is the way forward there?
I think if you look at what Alex Antic has been able to do in South Australia, you might think there is some hope. But that's South Australia. You've got a very small number. You're working off a very small base. In New South Wales and Victoria, the numbers are much larger, and it's like the lefties have to give up the power. And what I found in my time at the Liberal Party, the left side of the Liberal Party was a business side because they were running it. They were all there for their own sort of personal profit, jobs for themselves, contracts. It was a business venture, and they did it. They operated like a business venture. With methodology of how they would do things and making sure they always have the numbers and, transferring. So they'd have people that the first job they'd do every morning would look at the number of people in each branch to make sure they had control of the numbers. That was their job. And so if the Conservatives moved people into one branch, the left would correspond and countermeasure and bring people in for it. It was, and they've stitched up the rules. They changed the rules all the time. You guys wouldn't remember, there was a story. There was a guy up there in the state seat of Castle Hill, and he'd worked as a Conservative. He'd worked basically his whole life since being a young Liberal till he finally won the pre-selection and the last election in a really safe seat. And we went to like the head office final meeting, and they rolled him because they went through his social media and found he criticised Gladys Berejiklian over the lockdowns. They said, you criticise the sitting Liberal Premier, so we think that you can't be trusted to be a Liberal member of Parliament. They knocked him out. So he'd been in there for like a quarter of a century, working away, judiciously building up his numbers in the branches. Finally gets the pre-selection, finally gets there, right? And they take the prize away from him at the last minute. So I don't think it's redeemable. I really don't. I wish... I could think otherwise, but they've got such control, they've got such money, and the backbone of the Liberal Party, the Conservatives, they're not all that organised because they're people that are just there, through the right spirit. They're not concerned about doing it to make money or to, get involved in branch stacking or stuff like that. They're just there because they believe in the Liberal Party causes, and therefore they're not as organised as the left, and the left always outflanks them.
John, I'm going to have to go because we've got a COVID under question inquiry, COVID under trial inquiry on Wednesday, and I've got a lot of preparation to do for that tomorrow, so I'm going to have to get going.
Well, can I just ask you one last question then?
Sure.
What's the way forward outside of the Liberals? I think I know your answer, but this is a chance to give a plug on your way out. If the Liberals aren't the future, what does the centre-right do to fix this?
The uni party is a uni party. The Liberal and Labor parties have identical policies, almost to the T. The only difference is that there are some Liberals who will stand up. So the Liberals really have to be taught a lesson, and that's vote for the minor parties. I always say put One Nation number one, of course, but then preference. Each voter should preference UAP, Libertarians. There's another one that keeps Family First. They're the ones to really vote for.
Yeah, and then perhaps someday in the future, the One Libertarian Nation Party could... bringing us all together, but I won't hold you to that right now because you haven't got enough time.
Well, I think it's important to have a variety, to have a choice. That stimulates libertarians. It stimulates One Nation. I don't think we need to fold into one, because when we fold into one, if we folded into one, there'd be one person under attack the whole time, and it would just be relentless threats from both sides of the uni party.
And look, I think that if I'm successful at being elected to the Senate of Victoria, and if Craig has a win with his plebiscite in New South Wales and is successful at being elected for New South Wales, I'm confident we both very much look forward to working with Malcolm if he's re-elected.
Yep.
Yes, Liberal and National managed to stay separate
with the
parties.
Greens at times.
Oh.
It's rare. No, we have we educated the Greens about the verification. What did you call it? The online age verification bill. They realised that was a shortcut to digital identity, and Shoebridge stood up and said, "Hey, this is horrific." Well, the Greens are capable of learning from One Nation, not just bagging us.
Well, we certainly, if there's separate parties on the minor right, the crucial thing to tell everyone watching now, the 1800 and all your friends, preference. If you vote for one of the minor right parties, Libertarians, One Nation, Family First, make sure you preference 2, 3 to the other ones. So those preferences flow. The left are good at that. The right haven't always been good at that, and we can miss out on good senators such as the current Senator Malcolm Roberts, the potential future senators Jordan Dittloff and Craig Kelly. So please, preference. And thank you very much, Malcolm, for joining us. It's been an hour and a half of your time. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much, and keep going with this. This is the only way, exposing the truth. Thanks, John. Thanks, Brian. Jordan.
Thank you.
Craig.
Chat soon.
Thanks, Malcolm. Just on those preferences, you're 100% right on that. We've really got to try and do a lot more, because people clearly, especially in the Senate where it counts, they don't understand the preference system. They really don't. Again, if you walk down, George Street and sort of said and held out a test, explain to me how the Senate preference system works, you'd be lucky to find 1 in 100. And we saw, like at the last election, I know Clive was very generous with one of the things he helped with the Liberal Democrats. He thought, the Liberal Democrats are going to preferences, which they did on paper, but when it actually came to the vote, the Liberal Democrats' preferences went much tighter to the Liberal Party than they did, to what the ticket was.
I think
Yeah,
that's true. I was just going to say, I think that it really is important that people understand and have a higher level of education around preferences, as Craig says, especially in the Senate. It's one of the most powerful things, one of the most powerful tools we have. And I think that what we're going to see, and Craig was talking about this on 2GB this morning, and I've been talking about it for the past couple of days, with this ex-Liberal membership, yes, it's a bit of a gimmick. Yes, it's a bit of a sort of, I suppose, something to get a bit of attention and sort of put the frighteners on them a little bit. But I think that there will be many, many, many more, potentially in the realm of 1% to 1.5% of Liberal Party voters who voted Liberal in the Senate last time, who will now consider changing their vote potentially to Libertarian, number one below the line, and then working their way down through the coalition. My last vote when I was still a member of the Liberal Party back in 2014, in 2013 at the federal election, was I actually did vote Liberal in the lower house to try to make sure I changed the government, and I actually voted LDP as they were then in the upper house. And there'll be a lot of Liberals who don't want to see Albanese be re-elected, and because, like Craig says, they're not confident on the preference discipline of the minor parties, they might still keep their vote with a major party on the Green ballot. But when it comes to the upper house ballot, we've got a huge opportunity to say to them, if you want the government to change, but you want to send a message to the coalition and you want to make sure that whichever party gets in is held to account, then you can vote Libertarian in the Senate. So I think that with the right education, that's a big opportunity.
To add to that, people really underestimate how powerful the Senate is, and that if you have the right senators in place, unlike a lower house MP, they are in place for effectively double the term. So you can build good relationships with senators. You can educate them as to why certain, political outcomes are good versus others are bad. And then you have really powerful allies in the Senate who can kill bills and who can amend bad legislation and throw it back down to the House. So having a strong Senate is, I would argue, more important than sort of whether it's the red tie communist or the blue tie communist in the lower house. The Senate is extremely important. So someone was asking in the comments, are there any YouTube videos that outline how preferences work and how to get better at preferencing? Topher Field has a pretty good video on it. I haven't got the link at the moment, but I'm sure if you look it up, or someone in the comments will probably link to it, give it a watch, because your preference flows are important. Preference flows are what help get the minor party senators up into the Senate. So you need to make sure that you're doing it correctly.
Just one thing on that. One of the traps we fell into at the last election at the UAP, there's always the question, who are you going to preference? Who are you going to preference, right? And, it was like whichever, and it's a trap laid by the major parties, because whichever way you say, you're a stooge, you're really, you're giving your votes, and people saying, we were selling our votes to the Liberal Party. They didn't understand it. Like, it's the only person. So the only person that gives a preference as the person that marks the ballot paper with their own pen. The parties just make recommendation. That's something we've really got to get through. But I think important thing for the Libertarian Party, and else it's all got to be decided, is come out and openly say, yeah, guys, we're preferencing the Liberals, right? Albanese, we don't like a lot of Liberal policies, and we want to keep them honest. But Albanese is so bad, we're going to preference the Liberals, and you take that sort of like away from it, rather than I know we'll decide later, and we'll do some seats Liberal and some seats Labor, which is what we ended up doing, and it just became this like it was an absolute unmitigated disaster. People arguing about who we were preferencing, sort of thing, when it shouldn't have been.
Yeah, look,
Now,
I
Craig,
agree with you. I'd say that obviously when we're negotiating preferences, we don't want to sort of tell them at the beginning they've got our vote, because that's a bit, we're sort of showing our skirt, as my boss at the law firm would say. But I agree. I think the decision needs to be made early enough that it's not becoming a giant distraction. I totally agree.
But can I just say, a slight interruption here, slight segue. Craig, you were saying we there. Again, I was explaining the we's when Jordan and Malcolm were using it. But for you, Craig, I believe, as Tim's saying here, there may have been an announcement today, and I wouldn't want to preempt that. Craig, who do you mean by we?
Well, the we, I think I sometimes use the royal prerogative, but we is the Libertarian Party. So I'm now a card-carrying member. I've worn the shirt before. I had to cut the sleeves off it, sort of thing, to make it fit me. But I've worn the shirt before, sort of thing, during the New South Wales state election. So it looks a good fit. Look, I was just thinking, I'll quickly tell a story that Libertarians. I remember my dad was probably when I was 7 years of age. My father had built. He borrowed everything to the hilt, and he had this little factory. He built this little factory in Lakemba. And he was just opened up, and he just put the sign. He just put like the signs up, sort of thing, right? And the signs. It was Doris Kelly, which is my grandmother's name, was Doris Kelly Lighting. They had a proprietary limited at the end of it. And he's there, and he's proud as punch. He spent everything to do this and invested everything to build a factory where we can make stuff. We had 70 people on the books that were cutting and stitching and sewing, sort of thing. And this council bureaucrat came along, right? He came along with a measuring tape. He said, your sign's too big. He said, your sign on your building's too big. He said, it can only be 2 meters long, and it's 2.4 meters long or something, right? So my uncle got up on the ladder. He took the PTYLTD and just put the PL. And that's the way they fixed it. And that just reminds you of the petty bureaucracy that we've had. That is been the bane of my life. It's something I've just used to drive me nuts when I was working.
That could have been a bit of foreshadowing from the AEC debacle, Craig. That could have been meant to be destined. You had your own fight about science.
That's right. Yeah. And then so that's so I feel as though I'm at home, and I love Millet. That's really going to turn it. It's so important that he's successful, because he will set the standard. You just imagine if you had the continent of South America all with libertarian governments, what a turnaround that would be, and the strength and the prosperity in South America. You're talking about really world-changing situations here. So who knows what we can achieve in the years to go forward.
Because hoping to be able to swap this talk a little bit more with Malcolm in the room, and maybe even George earlier, but I've inadvertently scared away the explicit One Nation reps in the room. So it's we've stacked the audience now with Brian and I as hosts, and Jordan and Craig now as two out and proud representatives of the Libertarian Party. But in terms of where to from here on the centre right, if I can ask you guys, I know the instinct to just give the rah-rah answer each time, and I'm sure the rah-rah answer is correct, but you guys are also new on things. Objectively, just looking at the centre right in Australian politics, the Liberal Party seems hard to salvage. I think there's a lot of people with growing frustration on what do we do on the centre right. Many times before, minor right parties have showed up, given it a go, and got 2 to 5% each, and one gets over the line and not enough get over the line. So then you end up with this a block of 12 senators for the Greens, and one or two times in the past. What can we do there? Is there a solution? Do we just keep on plugging away and our time will come? Or is there a magic sauce that Jordan or Craig has in their back pocket that they can add to this equation?
Well, even though you turned into 90s internet at one point during that question, I've heard you ask it often enough that I know what you mean. And look, I think Craig and I would both have the same answer, because I think we've both been grappling with this at least since the last federal election, where, as Craig pointed out, the results of this kind of put the majors last momentum to sort of try to disrupt the Uni Party really didn't achieve the results we wanted. And that's not by accident or coincidence, it's by design. That's what the system is designed to do. The first thing Tony Abbott did when he got elected in 2013 was abolish the carbon tax and mining tax. The second thing he did was work with the Greens to abolish GVTs and to basically smash minor parties to the crossbench. So, and that's not a coincidence. It's because David Leyonhjelm, Bob Day and others were holding up a mirror to the Liberal Party and making them look bad, essentially, in a way that they don't have to worry about with the Greens and others. So I believe that there is or would be some value in a Senate alliance collaboration between the parties that are in that race across the country, where each party would maintain its own identity but run under a formal coalition ticket. So you might have in Queensland, for example, Malcolm Roberts and then Jim Wilmot and then whoever else down the ticket. And then in Victoria, you might have myself and Warren Pickering and whoever down the ticket. And by essentially agreeing to not compete for that number one winnable spot in each state and distributing those number one winnable spots between members of the coalition, you would have a broad sort of influx of centre-right sort of freedom-oriented senators who then, once they were in the Senate, in Parliament, could pursue their own agendas and cooperate where there was cooperation to be had, and essentially use that Senate alliance sort of system as a battering ram to break down the walls that the major parties have erected around Canberra. And if you say, well, Jordan, that sounds pretty reasonable, and why wouldn't anyone do that? It is unfortunate Malcolm's not here, because I think he would be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the system I just described. He's in for a hard fight. He already was, and now you've got us, the Libertarians, you've got Jared Rennick, you've got another sort of fairly high-profile independent that I'm hearing potentially running for the Senate. So it's a crowded sky. And I hope Malcolm is returned. If he's, I obviously hope the Libertarians get a senator in, but if they don't, I think Malcolm would be the person I would like to see in after that. But it is a case of, it's a Mexican standoff where no one wants to put their gun away first. And I will say that I did go to James Ashby from One Nation and put that proposal to him. And his response was that, look, Jordan, we're not a minor party anymore. And then a few weeks later, Mark Latham and, the other One Nation sort of upper house members kind of split away in New South Wales. So it was a bit of a unfortunate inflection, a bit of a sort of maybe karmic sort of indication that wasn't the case. But hopefully in future, those positions might change. And I think if I was elected to the Senate, and I'm sure Craig would agree, we would be working very hard to try to make that happen, because you almost need to have a seat at the table that you win without it, and then say, look, we don't want to pull the ladder up from behind us. We need to actually cooperate.
Yeah, look, just a comment on that same topic, if I may. This idea, some people pitch it as you need to just have different parties or they need to merge. There's a lot of chatter online. There's always, can't you merge, can't you merge? Look, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe it isn't. I got to tell you, it's just a lot harder than you think. But there is an alternative, which gets most of the benefits people want from a merger, is doable, and perhaps has some extra benefits in that it lets the different parties keep their identity and their differences. And that is this coalition idea. Like the Liberals and Nationals are two different parties, but they can be in a coalition. And this idea, what would it look like in reality, is basically a shared Senate ticket. So you can't lose your preferences, right? You don't have this preference loss, the preference leakage that is so common. And as Jordan said before, I know he put in a lot of good work this federal election cycle, trying to organize for the Senate ballot papers, at least in this upcoming federal election. Doesn't look like it's worked out. Just also, as I think Jordan and Craig both already know, one electoral cycle ago, 3 years ago, I was trying to do the same thing. I had these same conversations with some of the same people, some different people, and it is very hard to get people on board. Indeed, Craig, I think that was our first ever phone call back in your UAP days. I don't think you knew who I was, and you might have just been politely nodding and smiling until I got off the phone. But that was the first incarnation of us trying to get this idea off the ground.
I could see after the last election, the preference flows just are not there. Running different parties with similar values in the Senate just destroys it for everyone. And I've got a real concern about Queensland, where you've got the Libertarians, Jared Rennick and Malcolm Roberts are all running against each other, and where you've got Dutton being from Queensland, that the Liberal vote is going to be very strong. I don't know whether, I don't know whether you could, looking at that 6th Senate spot, I don't know whether you're going to be able to get Greens 1, Labor 1, Liberal 3, and whoever else it is 1. It's going to have to probably knock it off from the Liberal Party. And that's not going to be easy because the Liberal vote will be very strong. So I've got great concerns that, if you had a combined ticket, and I don't know however you worked it out, you'd be guaranteed to get either Jared or Malcolm or the Libertarians home. But, it is what is. This might be a lesson. The other thing I think that needs to be considered, and I was of the idea it would be good to keep the minor parties separate in the lower house. The concern I've got, and that's what that used to be very strong on. The concern I've got now is how they've changed the electoral funding laws. Right, they've bumped up the vote, the payment per vote, from about $3.15 or something, what it was, to $5. Now but you only get that if you get 4% of the vote. So we can have a situation where the Greens get 10% of the vote, which would be 10,000 votes, which would be $50,000 for one seat, right? But you could have 3 other minor parties getting 3.5% each and getting nothing, and therefore you're stuffed on your 50 grand goes a long way in a seat to pay for core flutes and T-shirts and how to votes and bits and pieces. And when you've got 3 parties that all have to fund that independently and are getting nothing, that's something I think really has to be looked at. Because that will come up at the next election. It really puts you at a great disadvantage if you're trying to run so many minor parties that, you've got no guarantee of getting the 4% of the vote. But, combined, you would get the 4% easily. And therefore you get that substantial electoral funding, which allows you to run a pretty professional campaign.
So I just had to play this one again for you, Craig. This comment coming up on screen. I don't know if people get that reference, if everyone's watched that show when they were a kid as well.
It kind of shows our age if we get that reference, doesn't it?
Yeah,
indeed. So if you get the reference, you're allowed on the social media. I think that's the that's the new
age verification test. It's like, do you know what Craig Kelly's face peering over the thing looks like?
And speaking of smart ass comments, I've just got to say, Rob, after that many hours of online meetings with me, I would have thought you'd learned how to spell my surname, you bastard. So
Humphreys.
Yes, I get all sorts. But yeah, look, there's some legs in that idea. It's not going to work out this time around. So realistically, then let's end it with this. The coalition idea, I think it's worth considering. It's worth keeping on the table. And if you're listening to this and you agree and you're a member of One Nation or UAP or Family First, please nudge them, and the Libertarians. Please nudge the party. The Libertarians are already on board. That's why I didn't mention them the first time around. But in the minor right space, instead of just saying angry person yelling in a cloud, get in touch with your party and say, some sort of coalition agreement. We're sick of getting close and then preferences splintering and not quite winning. Let's encourage them to let's encourage those parties to talk more often and make sure they're coordinating properly. So that's one thing you can do. But we're not going to be able to coordinate enough to do a coalition before this federal election. There's going to be a federal election soon. I guess 2 more questions then for both of the people. I'll go to Craig first, then Jordan, and then we'll sign off. Of course, Brian last to say the wittiest things of the night.
I'm eating ice cream, so you guys just.
So, Craig, I heard a rumor that you're going to be running for pre-selection for something in the upcoming election. What's your plan, and what does the end state look like?
Yeah, look, I'll put my hand up for the Libertarians and nominate to seek the Senate pre-selection. I understand it's a democratic process. I've actually spoken to another guy this afternoon that rang me that he's also putting his hand up, so that's good. I've got to make my case about why I'd be the best candidate. And that's fair, and that's how it should be. It's always got to be. You don't want to be in a situation where you've like the Liberal Party or One Nation also, where they're swapping around and it's all centralised control. You've got to have that joint done. As I said, if I miss out on that and I help to lick the stamps, so be it, sort of thing. But however it does, I'll be bashing away as hard as I can. Firstly, to get the Libertarian candidates up, but also it's important to try and we've got to defeat this Labor government because they are very bad. And then so it's two things: you're defeating Labor and you're putting a Liberal government in place that you've at least got some control over. That won't, you can put a bit of steel in their spine. That won't just be a Labor light. Because we've seen what's happened in places like the UK now. We've seen it in South Australia and Victoria for a long time, where you do get that Liberal Party in, and they are like a Labor light party. They get wiped out the next election for a very, very, very long time. And that's the real fear of what could happen, to the Liberal Party here in Australia. They get back in, they become woke as they can. Dutton appoints a whole lot of lefties. They go 3 years and lose, and then you've got Labor back in, and they're there for a long, long time, and you've got a disastrous Labor government like what we're seeing in the UK at the moment, like a really, really, really bad government.
I'd agree with Craig.
At the end of that process, assume you win the pre-selection. At the end of that process, there's a chance that we have Craig Kelly back in the federal parliament, sitting on different coloured seats this time instead of sitting on the green, sitting on the red. But that's probably the place in the minor party.
Make the joke with the senators. I said the red leather is a little bit thicker, a little bit higher quality because that's the upper house where they deserve to be. So. Yeah.
Well, they've got to sit on them longer as well, don't they? They've got two terms, so it's got to be more comfortable.
Yeah, and you're right about the power of the Senate. Those Senate committees that they have are enormously powerful. You don't really have those in the House of Reps. You don't have the Senate estimate processes. The House of Reps members aren't involved. Being a local member, you've got to make yourself get all the school fetes and the tuck shops and the footy things, and there's something on in your local electorate. I think one year I went to 25 school presentations or something one year that you went to, where you're handing out awards to kids sort of thing and watching all the school plays. It was over like about a 2-week period sort of thing. So as a senator, you're not so much tied up on that, and you can really work on some of the big ticket items, and you said you can hold these bureaucrats to account because through that Senate estimate process, which is something I would love to. I'd love to get some of these health bureaucrats before some of these committees and absolutely drill them. Because I've seen and look, Jared and a few of the guys have improved a lot recently. But what you've seen happen, going back a couple of years ago, is these bureaucrats that get before these committees, they would spin their bullshit, and there'd be no one there that actually had a big enough depth of understanding of the issues that could go back and go, mate, that's absolute bullshit. What you're telling me is wrong, and have the documents there that you can nail them with.
I think I'd go one further. I think some of those bureaucrats should be prosecuted.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, look, I think that I know I've already heard some panicked sort of smoke signals from within the Liberal Party that Craig's back on the radar and he's potentially going to be running for the Senate. They think he might win, Craig. I agree with them. And I don't want to preempt the democratic processes of New South Wales, but if you were our lead Senate candidate in New South Wales and you and I were elected to the Senate, I'd love to see you as the Libertarian spokesperson
on have some fun
on health and COVID. We would have some fun, and mate, I think the shredding business, to sell shredders in Canberra would become a very profitable market overnight. I think they'd be running out of stock.
Yeah, and you really have the ability of, and it takes look, even when I was like an independent, therefore, the ability to put amendments up to legislation, the ability to put up your own private members' bills, you can really expose the Liberal Party for the, of how weak they are, and that's what it's got to be about. It's got to be to put the steel in the spine of that Liberal Party, because anything can happen, but realistically, they're the ones that are potentially going to be in government. And, there's no point them being in government being weak and wishy-washy. And that's where I see that the great advantage of having a few libertarians, hopefully, Malcolm as well, Malcolm or Jared back up in Queensland, maybe someone, a few of us there that can actually hold their feet under the hot coals.
Yeah, and
that's a comment that came in earlier that's worthwhile giving some attention to now, that someone wanted you to know that apparently you are seen as the Australian version of RFK Jr. So maybe with slightly more dulcet tones.
I'm going to have to work on my fitness. I don't know if you saw him today. He was doing chin-ups and stuff. He's 70 years of age, and he's got he's fit. He's fit as like when I was playing footy back in the 20s sort of thing, like.
You just got to declare war on seed oils, mate, and then you're halfway there.
Yeah.
So anyway, that'll be great to see you back in Parliament if we can get you there, Craig. So looking forward to that and the race unfolding. So Jordan, I know you've got your own race. Feel free to lean into your own race as well. But I'd also like if you could give us the pitch. What are we looking forward to? When does the election season really kick off? And then what can we expect to see in that campaign? And how is it going to end? And then once you're a senator, are you going to remember us when you're big and powerful?
Yeah, look, I just first say what Craig said, I think we will see playing out in Queensland. On election night, at the height of his power, when he's been swept into power on the back of a really unpopular Labor government being turfed out, the first thing Chris Foley wanted to reassure public servants is that their jobs are safe. So that tells you what the next 4 years in Queensland is going to be like. It's just going to be like Bally Napthine in Victoria all over again. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, because if they start like that when they're meant to be at their strongest, that's when you can cut and when you can make your stamp on things. I think that Chris Foley's off to a very bad start, and I can see that happening here. And without Libertarians, without strong presence in the crossbench, like Craig says, I can see that happening to a Dutton-led coalition government, because Dutton is really the last gasp of the old Liberal Guard. So he's really the last of that Howard generation where he was minister in the Howard government, and he's got that corporate memory. As much as he's been wrong on the free speech issue, he has been quite strong and quite capable in other areas. But he is the last of those. And the people that are waiting in the wings in the backbench in the sort of outer ministry of the coalition are 51% weak, moderate populists. They're not conservatives. They're not classical liberals. They're people who don't have values, and they are the future leaders of the Liberal Party. So that's what we're trying to get ahead of and protect against. So, look, I think that I agree with what was said earlier. Unlike Malcolm, I do like to try to predict the future sometimes, and I do think we are more likely now to have a March election after we saw the Albanese government sort of clearing the decks. I don't think Parliament will come back. I think that the Parliament will be dissolved before it sits again in February, and we'll probably be looking at a late February, early March election, in my view. And if I'm wrong, we've got another 2 months to campaign ready to go, and then 2 months extra. So there's no real cost to that. I've been campaigning for the last 6 months. Do you remember Michael Ronaldson, Craig, Senator Ronaldson?
Yes.
He used to tell me that when you're campaigning, you want to rock up to the opening of an envelope. He said you want to be everywhere. And he was a gun of a senator, like as in he was old school, and he was a workhorse. He was relentless, and he was a big strapping man. He was like 6'4", big sort of commanding voice, and he was a good mentor back when the Liberal Party actually sort of had those. But that's how I was taught to campaign. Wear out 3 sets of shoe leather, just work my ass off, and that's how I campaign. And if we're successful, and if we're finding ourselves with a couple of Libertarian senators on the crossbench, that's day one of the next federal election campaign, and we need to work to expand that beachhead. I think One Nation gets it right more often than they get it wrong, and they're aligned in a lot of ways with our views at the federal level. But the one thing they've never been able to do is expand that beachhead. They've got that inherent limitation where it's a command and control structure. And for good reason, Pauline doesn't trust people enough to delegate and have the grassroots evolve, because she's actually done jail time because she trusted the wrong people. So I understand completely why she has that paranoia, and why the organisational structure of One Nation is brittle and doesn't have that decentralised features that we do. But we can actually make the Libertarian Party the Greens of the right. And that's what you can expect if we're elected.
Oh, thank you for that, Jordan. Thank you, Craig. And we are up to nearly 2 hours now. It's an hour 55, about 2,000 people watching. And quite a few people have been commenting in as we go. As you see, still coming in here. Lots of love for Craig coming in from the crowds. And a lot of cheekiness coming in from Rob, who wrote back in to misspell my name again, just to wind me up. I appreciate it, Rob. But anyway, Craig and Jordan, since George and Malcolm jumped off early, you got some free air for the libertarian angle, which, as you guys know, there's a lot of love and sympathy more broadly in this room for that. Although, of course, Brian and I are here wearing slightly different hats. I'm wearing my stupid Santa hat, and Brian, of course, is a very serious ATA hat. So to round us off here, Brian, take us back to the original thing here. We came here lamenting the state of politics. Going back to this original try to kick everyone off the internet crusade. Where's that going to go? After this next election, do you see, have we said enough in this 2 hours to change the future of politics? And if not quite in this 2 hours, over the next 6 months, 12 months, where's the free speech debate going to go in Australia?
I think the free speech debate is going to get better in Australia. I think that this has woken a lot of people up to the importance of having free speech online and protecting your identity. I think the age verification bill will eventually die in some way, shape or form, but I don't know when that will be. And then on the question of what happens in the election, I've been saying for 2 years that Peter Dutton's the next Prime Minister. I'm not so sure about that now. Given the age verification stuff, just because you will get a little bit of vote fracturing in some of those seats that they need, seats like Werriwa, seats like Patterson. It may be a repeat of where Abbott almost won the election and then had to spend another 3 years in opposition before becoming leader. Becoming Prime Minister. But before the age verification bill, I would have said that Peter Dutton was the next Prime Minister of Australia. And I've been saying that for 2 years. I was the crazy guy 2 years ago saying it.
Well, you're still crazy, just for different reasons today.
Yes.
So, look, I think the outcome similar to Abbott's first go, that's kind of been my suspicion for a while leading into, for the last couple of years. And I still think that's probably the most likely outcome. But there's a lot of time between now and then, a lot of moving parts, and I'm sure a lot more will be said, and there will be a lot more for us to discuss on an ATA live stream. So ATA, again, this is being put together by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, taxpayers.org.au. I said I wouldn't ask for your money again, so I won't. But if you accidentally feel like going to the website and giving us money, then, I won't notice. I'll forgive you. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Jordan, for joining us. And, of course, thank you, Brian, for doing all the hard work so that I can just skate in and so show up at the last minute and look good, or as good as I can. And look, we're going to do these semi-regularly going forward. You're probably not going to get too much notice. We'll try to give you as much notice as we can. It's fun to do these lives. It's fun to get the questions coming in. We might try to make it a way so that more people can actually duck in and out of the being on screen. But we'll see how it goes moving forward. But with that said, I'm going to round off. I didn't quite have 2 minutes more of filibustering to make it to the full 2 hour mark, so I'll just call it 2 hours anyway. We look forward to seeing you next time on X, Facebook, and YouTube. By the way, just before you go, if you haven't liked it yet, make sure you like it. After you like it, share it around. Make sure your friends also know where to find these conversations, because I think these sort of in-depth, serious political conversations where we dig into some issues and unwrap some of the details of how politics works, it's extremely valuable to a lot of people. Sometimes it's most valuable to exactly the people who don't know we're doing this yet. So if you could help your family and friends be aware of live streams like this, then that'd be great going forward. So please like and share, and I will see you next time. So thank you all, gents.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, guys.